Hi and welcome to Origin of Concepts. Today I'll make a longer video about Egypt and what Egypt is and how to understand Egypt, because the mainstream interpretation is very literal, just to use a word. First of all, the text is written literal, and therefore the entire story about Egypt and the gods and the treasures also get literal. And then there has been a lot of kings. It spans over 3,000 years, and things have changed on the run, and it has been one big mess, so to speak. And I'll try to clean up in this mess, and therefore I do this video today. So welcome and lean back, because I think I got something on my heart you have never ever been thinking about before. Let's start. The name Egypt derives from the ancient Greek Aegyptus, which evolved from the name Hikupta, meaning Temple of the Soul of Ptah, referring to the temple in the city Mennefer, known as Memphis today. So Egypt was the name of a temple in the city of Memphis, which the Greeks use as a term for the entire geological country Egypt. So that's the first mistake. Kemet is the real name, or KMT is the original name for the ancient Egypt, meaning the Black Land. And this is what it's all about. The name is commonly associated with the rich, fertile black soil along the banks of the Nile River, which was deposited during the annual floods, in contrast to Deseret, the Red Land, which is associated with the surrounding desert. None of them are correct. Kemet and Deseret are ancient Egyptian metaphysical terms used to name the geographical land and cosmological concepts. The belief that geological Egypt was divided into Upper and Lower Egypt is also inaccurate. Egypt and all its treasures dwell in the textures of the center of the Milky Way. So let's take a closer look at the Milky Way. Let's start with the Black Land. It's right in the front of you right now. It is a literal misunderstanding to interpret the Black Land as the fertile soil along the geological Nile River here on this earth. The Black Land is a term used for the striped shadow in the Milky Way center. And let me draw on the run here. This area is the black soil, or earth in the sky, also known as the field of reeds along the Nile River in the sky. So here you see the Black Land, the striped shadow with all the reeds. Kemet, or Egypt, is originally named after the dark shadows in the Milky Way center, and not by the fertile soil along the geological Nile. So here you got the origin of the name Kemet. This is the Black Land up here in the Milky Way center. Every term and concept in Egyptian culture was made by inspiration from the aspects of the Milky Way center. So everything, and I mean everything, was drawn out of the inspiration from the Milky Way and, mirrored on the ground. Let's move on to the Nile Delta. Clean the board. The Nile Delta is commonly related to as Lower Egypt, the upper region of Egypt where the Nile River split into multiple branches, creating a delta or a triangle between the waters. And before it running into the Mediterranean Sea, of course. And this interpretation is yet another misunderstanding of Egypt concepts, a literal interpretation. The Nile Delta is a term for the Nile Delta, the triangle in the Milky Way center. And let me draw it for you. Oh, sorry. This is the triangle, the delta, the Nile Delta in the sky. The delta is the pyramid in the sky visualized by the dark shadows forming a triangle. So here you got it. The Nile itself, or the Nile in the sky, is visualized by the striped shadow. So here we got the Nile in the sky. The three shadows encircling the Milky Way center and creates the pyramid or the triangle, the delta. And this is the branch of the Nile in the Milky Way leading into the mortal world. And in this river, it brings all the spirit light from the golden disk in the center of the Milky Way. The spirit is flowing with the Nile River into the mortal world. And guess what? Lower Egypt is the red part of the Milky Way, where the Nile Delta in the sky is placed. So this is Deseret. This is the Deseret area. And I'll get back to Deseret later. And short, now we got the triangle here. Let's talk about the pyramids. The pyramids in Egypt represent the exact same triangular delta of dark shadows surrounding the Milky Way center, with the fire spirit in the middle. You know, pyramids means fire in the middle. And the fire is, of course, the golden disk here. And all the fire is the red part of the Milky Way, you know, blazing out. So here you got the pyramid with the fire in the middle. And you can check out my pyramid video for further details on this subject. Okay, let's go into Upper and Lower Egypt, because that's one of the subjects that has, it has a long tail of failures, because when you don't got the foundation or the premise right, you know, the entire narrative is getting wrong, and it's very literal. The geological Egyptian landmass was never split up into a lower and upper part. This is a total misinterpretation of the concept of the Hedjet and Deseret crowns of the Upper and Lower Egypt. And let me get ready for drawing here. Upper Egypt is a term for pure spirit, the white one, represented by the white Hedjet crown, which is visualized by the white silvery female posture shadow in the Milky Way center, the bowling pin. And let me draw it for you. Here you got the Hedjet crown, so to speak. So this is the crown of pure, unmanifested spirit, the woman in the sky, so to speak. The woman and the mother was originally the highest entity above all others in ancient Egypt, and the silvery shadow represents the mother figure in the Egyptian cosmology. And she was named Aset, or in the later, or in the newer, history, it was like Isis and so on. She got many names. She is the queen of heaven, so to speak, the throne. And then we got Lower Egypt, which is a term for the red part in the Milky Way center, the Egyptian desert, visualized by the golden red light emanating from the disk. The manifested spirit in man, channeled through the pharaoh. And let me visualize that for you here, or have a red color. The red part of the Milky Way is like this part here. This is the red part of the Milky Way. And it forms the desert crown. That's why the pharaohs wear this, because they were the connection between the spirit and the mortal world. So they have to wear the red crown, of course. And the white crown too, because they have to get the spirit manifested in the red crown so they could, bring it to the population in the mortal world. And that's the explanation of the Upper and Lower Egypt. It has nothing to do with the geographical Egypt to do. There was no kings ruling the upper and the lower. It's nonsense. It's all in here, to get the spirit manifested and give it to the people. All right, then let's talk about the desert land, because the the red crown was, interpreted as the desert outside Giza, for example, or the desert, but it has nothing to do with the desert. The term desert land is generally connected to the geological Egypt desert by the term desert, the red one, and opposite to Kemet, the black land. However, the desert land has nothing to do with the geological desert, as I just told you. It's a term used for the red part of the Milky Way to define man's, or the pharaoh, connection with manifested spirit. So here we got it. That's how you have to understand the concept of Upper and Lower Egypt, and of course the desert land here, the golden disk with manifested spirit running through the pharaoh and into to try to get you some wisdom if you were ancient Egyptian. Okay, let's move to another thing that hurts my heart, and that's the connection of Egyptians and sun worship. They believe that the Egyptians worship the sun, or use the everyday sun for every kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things to comment on that, because the Egyptians never ever worshipped the sun as a god. Never. The majority, if not all textures mentioning Ra, the sun, refers to the golden disk in the Milky Way center here, the hidden sun, a moon. This is the sun they are talking about, not the physical sun out there. And let me see here. That's the spirit sun, so to speak. And this minor confusion has given a widely misleading perception of ancient Egyptian concepts. Of course, because if you think that the disk in the Milky Way center is the physical sun, then you're already way off to understand what the Egyptians were babbling about, so to speak. Okay, I can come up here with a great example on how things get mixed up. So let's use the Egypt city of Heliopolis as an example. The name Heliopolis is commonly translated to the city of the sun. And then everybody automatically assume that it's the city of the physical sun. But in reality, Helios is the sun in the Milky Way center. This sun, the golden disk. And just to let you know, our physical sun in the sky is named after this disk in the Milky Way center. So every time you hear the word sun or Helios or whatever, there's 1,000 names, in divine texts or in myth and stuff like that, it's always the disk in the Milky Way center. It's never the sun. Never. Okay. And that's just the name Heliopolis, which was the Greek term. But in reality, the name for the city, the original name was Juno, which means city of the pillars. And that's much better because now we understand what the Egyptians were doing. And when we, when we name the city of pillars, the experts quickly link pillars to an obelisk at the temple. But in reality, the term pillars is an allegory of the striped shadow in the center of the Milky Way. The gate to the underworld, or duat, so to speak, the place of creation and manifesting of spirit. And let me show the pillars, because the pillars is the striped shadow, which also gave the inspiration to build the temple pillars and the Egypt temples. So, and of course, this is the gate to higher spirit. So here you got the real understanding of the Heliopolis, or rather the city of pillars. Okay, and by the way, the obelisk is also a symbol of the striped shadow, because the entire striped shadow here is the obelisk. Check out my obelisk video to get deeper information on that subject. Let's move on to the understanding of worshipping of gods, because the Egyptians did not worship gods as a fanatic religious. All the deities were expressions of aspects of the cosmos, which were used to build the fundamental structure of societies and in everyday practice. The balance of Maat, or the universal law, so to speak. The Egyptians, lived with the nature, and they were thinking very deep, and they matched what they saw above, below, so to speak, as above, so below. But they, they knew that to create life on Earth, you got the father and the mother, and you'll get a little baby. And the same they put on the universe, on the big cosmos. Oh, there must be a father up there and the mother, and together they get a child, And you can watch more about this in my Milky Way introduction video, where I talk about this foundational concept that created most of the world myths. And let me see here. The temples and the tombs were the only religious centers in Egypt, reserved for the high priest and the elite only. Very few Egyptians have ever set their foot in a temple. The everyday Egyptian never go into a temple. So it was, it's like today, you can't go into the inner chamber of the Vatican or something because it's only for the Pope and stuff like that. It was not for average people. So we define Egypt by what the priests and the tombs, is telling us. That's waggo. That's waggo. And our major understanding and interpretations of the Egyptians come from tombs and temples. Yeah, I just told you that. So that's that's also it gives a wrong picture. And another important point is that the ancient Egyptians weren't missionaries, like we know from the modern religions. Egyptians did not try to export their beliefs to others, because it was just a way of living. It was not like a religion like we know today. They didn't, oh, Ra, please come back tomorrow. Otherwise my wheat will die. It's not like that. So we could maybe, combine it with the modern physics, or something like that. Ways to explain things and to do things. Okay, enough of worshipping of gods. I think it was very important to, just so we don't get this black and white picture of, a very ancient, stupid civilization, great for building monuments, but And then let's go to another crucial aspect of the Egyptians, the helical rising of Sirius and the flooding of the Nile. And I'll clean the board here. The Egypt goddess Subdet, or Isis, is commonly related to the star Sirius, which is connected to the annual flooding of the Nile River in start of July. And from my perspective, the entire theory connecting Egypt entities to constellations is a big mistake. Really. But what happens at the start of July? Subdet, Isis, is represented by the shining silvery female posture shadow, and she stands tall on the horizon in the start of July. Let me draw her here. Yeah, pink is fine. She's standing right here. And in the start of July, the horizon will be like here. So she is standing tall on the horizon. And more interesting is the Nile River in the sky, visualized by the striped shadow. Here, let me make another color. Here is a part of the silvery shadow. So the floating stripe is a part of Subdet. So the flooding Nile, so to speak, she is the flooding Nile, and she indicating the start of the agricultural season, and not necessarily a literal flooding of the geographical Nile, because the Nile is flooding here. The striped shadow is also used in other myths, like Noah's Ark as the great flood or deluge, and it's used in Atlantis, and it's used in many other myths for, for waters overflowing. So when the striped shadow here and the lady standing on the horizon, the Egyptians know, now we are ready to to put our seeds in the earth, or harvest, or whatever they did. And then let me add a little to the Subdet, the lady here, because on the head she got the 5-pointed star Seba, which is related to the star Sirius, and it's not Sirius. And I'm serious, it's not serious. Seba is the name of the star, refers to an imperishable or imperishable star related to divine doorways and gates, and is the star of Duat, the gate of the underworld. And at the same time, this star is a follower of Osiris. Aha. Let's take a look at this. First of all, the gate, you already see it, is the blue, is the striped shadow, the blue stripes here. That's the gate to the underworld, Duat, because Duat is the chamber here inside the dark shadows in the Milky Way center. And we already have subject here. And Osiris is also a character based on the entire Milky Way center. And you can go look at my Osiris video. He's right there. You already saw his bowling pin hat. And now the most important, because the brightest imperishable star in the sky is not a star, but the bright light from the golden disk in the Milky Way center and the stars in the striped shadow. And let me explain here. Inside the striped shadow, there's a lot of different colored stars. It's the rainbow place in the sky. So in this area, we got all the brightest stars, so to speak, in the Milky Way center. And the brightest of them all is, of course, the disk in the Milky Way center, which is pronounced as a star, because a star means a shining thing, so to speak. So they were not talking about the stars or the constellation, but the star in the center of the Milky Way, or the stars, if we count in all the colored stars. So that's why she wear the 5-pointed star zebra on top of her head. Yeah, that's all about the helical rising of Sirius and the Nile flood. Let's move on to the biblical Egypt. Very important. I'll delete all the colored stars here. The biblical Egypt translate from the Hebrew Misraim, which meaning fortified land, straight, narrow place, mount or fortress. And let me see here. And this is all terms which are allegories of the striped shadow in the Milky Way center, also used to create the narrative of the Gate of the Gods and Babylon and a lot of other things. And let me explain here. Because the striped shadow is the gate. We already been into that, but it's the gate here. So Mizraim has nothing to do with Egypt. And here you have it's the fortification, the city wall. It's the narrow, the narrow place is here inside the shadow surrounding the Milky Way center, and so on and so forth. It has nothing to do with Egypt. In fact, not the geological Egypt. And most importantly, long before the Abrahamic religions, the striped shadow was used to name Kemet and the term Temple of the Soul of Ptah, which became Egypt. And the Temple of the Soul of Ptah is the Milky Way center, specifically this part, the arch with the two pillars, the land of Duat, or the field of reeds in the afterlife, or in the nether world, or afterworld, or whatever. Okay, no matter how the biblical Mizraim is interpreted, it has never been related to the geographical land of Egypt. It's impossible. The biblical Egypt is a metaphorical place based on the striped shadow in the Milky Way center. And that's a fact. Kemet, the black land here. Okay. And Egypt is just one of many fictional foraging lands visualized by the striped shadow, symbolizing enemy forces, or to be more specific, human unnecessary excess, the bad parts of human, which basically is a threat to obtain or gain spirit and wisdom. So you have to overcome them, It's your enemies, and you have to fight them before you die, or otherwise, there's no goal. The Bible writers were copycats, grabbing the entire concept direct from the 9 bows in ancient Egypt, which the pharaohs was required to subdue to maintain harmony in the universe. So, all those lands here, like the Garden of Eden, Babylon, Canaan, Libya, Assyria, etc., etc., etc. It's not original geographical places. It's just terms for foreign countries you have to overcome. All right. That's the biblical Egypt. Let's move on to the. I made a topic here named "Slowly Suicide of the Ancient Wisdom," because that was exactly what happened to Egypt. In the beginning, Egyptian cosmology were quite simple, or navigable, to use Plato's word in his Atlantis texts, and was centralized around the mother and the father and their offspring, with the mother as the supreme being. The mother was she was way up over Ra or anybody else, because she is the mother is, creating thing into the physical realm, so to speak, both here on Earth but also in the universe. And the only thing to impregnate the mother was the spirit seed of the father. But it was her who created everything. Sorry, it's late here. And successive kings systematically personalized the core concept to align with their own perspectives. They expanded the concepts by incorporating and blended old and new characters, each with their fresh interpretation and roles. So they took the old gods of the old system, and then they added, and then they renamed, and they mess around with everything just to, I'm the king, I want to make my own version of this, which I understand. And then I want everybody else to understand it too. And, the bureaucratic system, it getting more and more detailed, and full of small devils here and there. And the situation did not get better with the successive kings reusing building materials and overrode each other's hieroglyphs. And even the hieroglyphs changed meanings, which will say that the Rosetta Stone, which is our time capsule to understand the Egyptians, was just the interpretation of the day by a new bunch of priests. The Rosetta Stone is, it's not from the very ancient Egypt. It's just, one of the, yeah, you know what I mean. It was just the writings of the day. And then we use it to, decode all the hieroglyphs. And that's pretty bad, because it doesn't give the full understanding of anything. All right, the root cosmology developed into various interpretations in different areas of Egypt. You know, if you go to Memphis, there was one, then you go to Heliopolis, there was another, and you go to the Karnak, there was a third, and then you got a lot of different versions of the same root concept. And not to forget that multiple pharaohs ruled in different areas of Egypt at the same time. Actually, I didn't know that 1 year ago, that there was more pharaohs than just one, controlling the entire Egypt. That was basically area, or what's the name? There were time periods where we got more than one pharaohs, So that's also very important to take that into consideration. And then we get to the 18th dynasty, where the pharaoh Akhenaten was the only pharaoh ever attempting to clean up all this mess by using the 18 disk as the highest entity. And the 18 disk was, of course, the disk in the Milky Way center, casting its light of spirit down to us through the striped shadow in the Milky Way center. And despite the scattered cosmology, the core premise in all the different branches of systems remained rooted in the Milky Way center, and namely around the disk in the Milky Way center, because that's the origin of everything, the winged disk in the sky, because the Milky Way center is the winged disk. Let me draw it for you here. And if we use the female shadow here, it's the other wing. So here you got the winged disk. It's all about the golden light here. All right. Then we reach the last thing here, which is the destruction of Egypt and its treasures. And let me remove... we try here. The Christian religious war on paganism was the main power who institutionalized and destroyed the remains of ancient Egypt and all of its invaluable treasures, collected in Alexandria. So this was the end of the era of the free mind and the free speech, so to say. It culminated with the ultra-fanatic Coptic Christian Shenut of a tribe from the White Monastery in Egypt, leading a bloody witch hunt on pagans and all others who didn't convert into the ultra-fanatic and strict Christian religious dogma. It was very bad at that time, like... So it made all the people with wisdom flow into secret societies, and that's another story I'll get into in another video. But that was the origin of secret societies, because the Christians were so brain dead, you couldn't move around them, or you would be hanged or killed or burned on the stake or whatever. The Christian war on paganism has led to the most devastating consequences for mankind ever. Ever. The bloody and ultra-fanatic Christianity was also one of the primary reasons that many left Christianity and created Islam. So Islam, is pre-Christian, but they couldn't tolerate the harsh Christians, so they made Islam, to make it better. And then a lot of things happens, but that will be for another video. The Abrahamic religions, emperors, and the royal houses copied everything from Egypt and converted it into their own dogmatic belief and power systems. You know, everything from symbolism to structures, everything comes from Egypt, and maybe a little bit from the East, but mainly Egypt, into this day. And I'll make a video about the royals later, where I'll go deeper into that subject. But I'm sure you are aware of the rest of that history and how it looks now. Okay, let me come to a conclusion here. Because of course the metaphysical aspects of the Egyptian cosmology was mirrored into the everyday aspects of the Egyptian society. But that's not what all the scriptures is about. It was about the divine stuff, all the things we can't see. So forget the literal interpretations of the Egypt scriptures. Thank you. And it leads me to the end. And I hope you enjoyed my lecture here on Egypt. I think it's time to rethink the entire Egyptian narrative from entirely new angles, using the Egyptians' own wisdom. Because only by using their wisdom, we can understand their messages. And now you know they got most of their inspiration from the Milky Way Center, if not at all. Thank you for watching, and until next video, take care. Bye.